Welcome back to Cracking the Code 3rd edition. We're in the Glossary, reading under the U's. UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. UCC, Section 1-103. Supplementary General Principles of Law Applicable. Unless displaced by the particular provisions of this code, the principles of law and equity, including the law merchant and the law relative to capacity to contract, principal and agent, estoppel, fraud, misrepresentations, duress, coercion, mistake, bankruptcy, or other validation or invalidating cause shall supplement its provisions. UCC 1-104, Construction against Implicit Repeal. This code being a general act intended as a unified coverage of its subject matter, no part of it shall be deemed to be impliedly repealed by subsequent legislation if such construction can reasonably be voided. UCC, see note. Note, nothing in the UCC has ever been repealed, nor can it ever be. In the event of conflict between a deleted section and a current section, and deleted section controls, if this is examined, one will see that it cannot be any other way. Potentially, countless commercial transactions can be consummated based on the current UCC at any given time. To cancel any portion of the UCC at a later point is to throw into upheaval and chaos all commercial agreements that were based on the deleted portion, and act that would carry unimaginable astronomical liability for any of the actors who attempted to effect such change. Ultra vires, unauthorized, beyond the scope of power allowed or granted by a corporate charter or by law. Black 7th. Uniform Commercial Code, or UCC, one of the uniform laws drafted by the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws and the American Law Institute governing commerce transaction, including sales and leasing of goods, transfer of funds, commercial paper, bank deposits and collections, letters of credit, bulk transfers, warehouse receipts, bill of ladings, investment securities, and secured transactions. The UCC has been adopted in whole or substantially by all states. Black 6th. A code of laws governing various commercial transactions, including the sale of goods, banking transactions, secured transactions, and personal property, and other matters, that was designated to bring uniformity in these areas to the laws of the various states, and that has been adopted with some modification in all states, as well as the District of Columbia and in the Virgin Islands, Barron's 3rd. Unless displaced by the particular provisions of this code, the principles of law and equity, including the law merchant and the law relative to capacity to contract, principal and agent, estoppel, fraud, misrepresentation, duress, coercion, mistake, bankruptcy, and other validating or invalidating cause shall supplement this provisions. UCC 1-103, see note. Note, to paraphrase the third definition above, the UCC is the supreme codified law on the planet, and all other forms of law are encompassed by it and included in it. Pennsylvania was the first state to adopt the UCC on July 1, 1954, and Louisiana the last, in January 1, 1975. United States, or U.S. United States means A federal corporation, Title 28 U.S.C. Section 3002, subsection 15, Chapter 176. It is clear that the United States is a corporation. 534, Federal Supplement 724. The United States of America is a corporation endowed with the capacity to sue and be sued to convey and receive property. 1st of March December. Oh, just kidding. Bouvetier's Laws Dictionary. So that comes out of the capacity to sue and be sued to convey and receive property. That's the Act of 1871, right on the first page. This term has several meanings. So the United States has several meanings. It may be merely the name of the sovereign occupying the position analogous to that of other sovereigns in family of nations. It may designate territory over which sovereignty of the United States extends, or may be collective name of the states which are united by and under the Constitution, Black 6th. The United States government is a foreign corporation with respect to a state. 19. Corpus Juris Secundum, section 884. In reference to Miriam's estate, and there's your case. Quote, what is included in terms United States and possessions of United States? Hawaii and Alaska are included in the term United States. Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands of the United States, the Philippine Archipelago, Guam, Tutuila, and Manua, and other islands of the Samoan group east of the longitude 171 degrees west of Greenwich, and the Canal Zone are included in the term possessions of the United States. United States Official Postal Guide, July 1929. Quote, the code has become one of the United States' most important exports. The ABCs of the UCC by Russell A. Hakes, 2000. See note, District of Columbia in the state bankruptcy. Note, it is well settled that United States, etc., is a corporation originally incorporated February 21st, 1871, under the name District of Columbia. 16 Statute 49, Chapter 10, you know all that. A bankrupt organization per House Joint Resolution 192 of June 5, 1933, Senate Report 93-549, and Executive Order 6072, 6001, 6002, 6111, and 6246, a de facto government, originally the 10 square miles tract ceded by Maryland and Virginia and comprising Washington, D.C., plus the possessions, territories, forts, docks, and arsenals tract from Virginia was retroceded in 1846. It is also abundantly clear in postal matters the term United States is a political entity distinct from the 50 freely associated compact states or the several states of the Union. From the last sight of the definition above, one can also see that United States is a singular proper noun, just as corporate General Motors is not plural. Neither is corporate United States. For the corporate history of the United States, Inc., see Demise of the American Constitutional Republic in Appendix. United States Code, USC, a multi-volume published codified of federal statutory law. In a citation, it is abbreviated as USC, as in Title 42 USC Section 1983, Black 7th. United States Notes, promissory notes resembling banknotes issued by the government of the United States, Black 6th. Note, the last president to print United States notes was John F. Kennedy. Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy were assassinated for the same reason. They were making significant changes in the monetary system. Assassinations were attempted on other presidents by the same people for the same reason, but were unsuccessful. United States of America, USA. The Republic, whose organic law is the Constitution adopted by the people of the 13 states, was declared their independence of the government of Great Britain on the 4th day of July 9, 1776. If the nation comes down from its position of sovereignty and enters the domain of commerce, it submits itself to the same laws of commerce that govern individuals therein. It assumes the position of ordinary citizen, and it cannot recede from the fulfillment of its obligations. Bouvier's 8th. A federal republic formed after the War of Independence and made up of 48 conterminous states, plus the state of Alaska and the District of Columbia in North America, plus the state of Hawaii in the Pacific. Black 7th. Quote, of or pertaining to or founded upon the organized by a compact or act of union between separate sovereign states as one by a league or common interest and defense as regards external relations, the internal sovereignty of each member remaining unimpaired as the Hanseatic League or the German Confederation. Or 2, by the permanent act of union founded on the consent of the people duly expressed, constituting a government supreme within the sphere of powers granted to it by that act of union as the United States of America. The Constitution of the United States of America is of a very different nature than that of the German Confederation. It is not merely a league of sovereign states for their common defense against external and internal violence, but a supreme federal government or compositive state, acting not only upon the sovereign members of the Union, but directly upon all its citizens in their individual and corporate capacities. From 1776 to 1789, the United States were a confederation. After 1789, it was a federal nation. Counterminous, sharing a common boundary. Enclosed in a common boundary. Notice that 1903 Funk and Wagnalls affirms that the term United States was a plural designation between 1776 and 1789, but that after 1789 it was singular. USC, United States Codes. Utility, something useful, a useful thing. Webster's. Utility is said to be absent of frivolity and mischievousness, and utility for some beneficial purpose. And the degree of utility is not material. Bouvier's 8th. Value. Alright, now we're in the V's. Value. Equivalent worth or return in money, material, services, etc. A person gives value for rights if he or she requires them in any of the following ways. A return for a binding commitment to extend credit or for the extension of immediately available credit, whether or not drawn upon, and whether or not a chargeback is provided for in the event of difficulties in collection. B. A security for or in total or partial satisfaction of a pre-existing claim. B. By accepting delivery pursuant to a pre-existing contract for purchase. D. Generally in return for any consideration sufficient to support a simple contract. UCC 1-20144. A. An instrument is issued or transferred for the value if any of the following apply. 3. The instrument is issued or transferred as security for an antecedent claim against any person. UCC 3-303 A3. See note. Note. A necessary provision of law is remedy. The operation of acceptance for value is, by deduction, remedy. When you file a UCC financing statement and redeem your original birth document and claim the straw man's trade name, no one can dispute or challenge the claim, and title passes. You have, by definition, the supreme right to reclaim title of your birth certificate, straw man, and trade name over all others, because its very existence is derived entirely from you, thereby evidencing value. In fact, every one of the above definitions applies directly in the case of you and your trade name. A good exercise would be to walk through all the definitions until you understand how the value aspect applies. So paragraph A, B, and C of the sample private agreement offered herein are taken directly from the above definitions of value. Once you fully understand how you have given and continue to give value, you will know how you acquired your rights, and you will also achieve an unshakable certainty of your true standing in a societal scheme of things. The fact that you have given value is confirmed and tacitly acknowledged and validated by government in its silence and registration of the UCC financing statement, among other things. The instrument, or your birth certificate, is transferred and redeemed by you as security for an antecedent claim against any person, your trade name, based on your pre-existing claim. Vehicle, that in or on which persons, goods, etc. may be carried from one place to another, especially along the ground. That which is used as an instrument of conveyance, transmission, or communication. Term refers to every device in, upon, or which a person or property is or may be transferred upon a highway. Black. Sixth. Note, per the above definition, a transmuting utility is a strawman, is a vehicle. Another definition of vehicle is inland vessel in the Admiralty. Vessel. The term vessel in Admiralty law is not limited to ships or vessels engaged in commerce. Black. Sixth. Note, in Admiralty, names of vessels are designated in capital letters. Wherever you appear in any public forum, it is always via your strawman, your all capital letters vessel, much like an officer stands on the bridge of his ship and sails it into port. All law is now Admiralty maritime, and you can no longer go into court as a man or woman only by sailing your vessel into the jurisdiction of the court. Everyone speaks from his or her vessel, with one vessel officer transacting with another. Each is trying to get the other officer to recognize the condition of his or her vessel, that is to say, its registration. If a vessel is unregistered on the high seas in time of war, it is presumed and assumed to be a pirate vessel, to be confiscated and investigated. If the vessel is registered, the exact issue is with which public entity is registered. Your strawman is a transmuting utility, is a vessel, is an inland vessel, an admiralty is a public vessel, is a vehicle. In war times, currently now, neutral vessels or trade names require passports. Vice Admiralty courts in English law. Courts established in the Queen's possession beyond the seas, with jurisdiction over the maritime causes, including those relating to prize. Note, all courts in America are Vice Admiralty courts in the Crown's private commerce. Voluntary surety, see surety. Voluntary suretyship, see suretyship. Moving on to the W's and the glossary. War. Hostile conflict by means of armed forces carried on between nations, states, or rulers, or sometimes by parties within the state, nation, or state. War is also a period of such conflict. Black 7, see note. Note, the above definition includes the war currently being conducted by the U.S. government against the American people as sureties of their citizen of the United States trade name, as declared in the Amendatory Act of March 9, 1933, to the Trading with the Enemy Act of October 6, 1917. War contribution, an extraordinary payment imposed by an occupying power on the population of an occupied territory during wartime. Black 7th. Note, Social Security payroll taxes are war contributions. Mixed War. See Mixed War. War Powers. See Trading with the Enemy Act of October 6, 1917. Wards of Court. Infants and persons in unsound mind. Black's 4th. Note, per corpus juris secundum, clients of attorneys are, quotes, wards of the court, unquote, thereby also qualifying them as persons of unsound mind, non compos mentis. Warehouseman. A warehouseman is a person engaged in the business of storing goods for hire. UCC 7-102. Note, some birth certificates have two sets of numbers printed on the back of them. One of the numbers identifies the state warehouse district where the birth took place. The state is the warehouse. Each county is a warehouse district. The governor is the main warehouseman. The county recorder of each county is the district warehouseman. The birth certificate is a warehouse receipt and a field warehouse receipt. It also is a dock receipt. The ship, the vessel in Admiralty, the trade name, was berthed at a specific warehouse or hospital in a specific warehouse district or county, and the goods, being your body, were delivered therein. Warehouse receipt. A receipt issued by a person or bailee engaged in the business of storing goods for hire. UCC 1-201-45. A warehouse receipt constitutes a document of title under the Uniform Commercial Code which evidences that a person in possession of the document is entitled to receive, hold, and dispose of the document and the goods it covers. UCC 1-201-15. A warehouse receipt may be a negotiable instrument depending on its terms. Barron's 3rd. A warehouse receipt on or other document of title is negotiable if by its terms the goods are to be delivered to the bearer or to the order of the named person, or B, where recognized in overseas trades, it is run if it runs to a named person or assigns. UCC 7-104. Wholesale. To sell by wholesale is to sell by large parcels, generally in original packages, and not by retail. Compare retail. Note, the U.S. government acquired birth certificates, strawman titles, and wholesale bulk purchase. Wizard of Oz, the motion picture. 1939, a Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Book by L. Frank Baum. All right. C note. Note, just as you can read between the gory lines in the newspaper on any day and discover clues issued by the powers that be, if you look hard enough, as to what is actually going on, such notice can also be found in lighter fare like the movies. Such a movie was The Wizard of Oz, an allegory for the new state of affairs in America in the 1930s. Following the stock market crash and the factual bankruptcy of the U.S. government immediately thereafter. The setting was Kansas, heartland America, and geographical center of the United States of America. In comes the twister, the tornado, that is to say, whirling confusion, the stock market crash, theft of America's gold, U.S. bankruptcy, the Great Depression, and whisks Dorothy and Toto up into a new artificial dimension somewhere above the solid ground of Kansas. When they finally land in Oz, Dorothy comments to her little companion, quotes, "Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore," unquote. After the bankruptcy, Kansas was no longer just plain old Kansas. It was now KS, capital KS, artificial corporate venue of the bankrupt United States, newly established federal territory, part of the federal zone, and Dorothy and Toto were in this state. In the 1930s, the all-capital letters written straw man, newly created artificial aspect of the former American sovereigns, had no brain, and the Americans were too confused and distracted by all the commotion to figure out that they even had a straw man or trade name. The Scarecrow identified his straw man persona for Dorothy. Quote, "Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking. Of course, I'm not bright about doing things," unquote. And in his classical song, "If I Only Had a Brain," the Scarecrow succinctly argued, "I'd unravel every riddle for every individual in trouble or in pain." Translation: once one discovers that his straw man exists, all political and legal mysteries, complexities, and confusions are resolved, and once one reclaims the legal title attached thereto, he can protect himself from legal trouble and damage. The Tin Man, or TIN, Taxpayer Identification Number Man, was a hollow man of metal, a vessel, a vehicle, newly created commercial code words for the straw man. Just like the Scarecrow had no brain, this Tin Man vessel had no heart. Both were artificial persons. One of the definitions of tin in Webster's is counterfeit. The Tin Man also represented the mechanical and heartless aspect of commerce and commercial law, just like they say in the Mafia. Nothing personal, it's just business. Quote. The heartless Tin Man also carried an axe, traditional symbol for God, that is to say modern commercial law. In most earlier dominant civilizations, including fascist states, in the words of the Tin Man expressing relief after Dorothy had oiled his arm, quotes, "I've held that axe up for ages," unquote. The word ace is etymologically related with the word axe, and in a deck of cards, the only one above the king is the ace, that is to say God. One of the Axis powers of the World War II, Italy, was a fascist state. The symbol for fascism is the fasces, a bundle of rods with an axe bound up in the middle and its blade projecting. The fasces may be found on the reverse of the American Mercury head dimes. The Roman deity Mercury was the god of commerce, and on the wall behind, and on each side of the speaker's podium of the U.S., each gilded fasce is approximately 6 feet in height. At the base of the seal of the U.S. Senate are two crossed fasces, and directly below Lincoln's hands in the face of the arms of the chair in which Lincoln is sitting in the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The lion, moving along, the lion, or king of beasts, see Gentiles, some members of society regard you as your family and friends as nothing more than animals, cattle, to be bred and birthed, herded and harvested and sold and slaughtered according to the whims of those who run the global plantation. The denigration in itself, representing the once fearless American people, had lost its courage. After your first round with the UCC constituted IRS defending your Tin Man or dummy corporation, vessel, vehicle, individual employee, public corporation, all capital letters written, juristic name, artificial person, straw man, trade name, you probably lost some of your courage too. You didn't know it, but the IRS has been dealing with you strictly under the laws of commerce, and just like the Tin Man, commerce is heartless. To find the wizard, you had to follow the yellow brick road, that is to say, follow the trail of American stolen gold, and you will find the thief who stole it. In the beginning of the movie, the wizard was represented by the traveling mystic, Professor Marvel, whom Dorothy encountered when she ran away with Toto. His macro ray shingle touted that he was acclaimed by the crowned heads of Europe, past, present, and future. Boy, that Professor Marvel must have been a regular wizard to be acclaimed by the future crowned heads of Europe before they were even crowned. Before the bankers stole America, they had long since disempowered the Christian monarchies of Europe and looted their kingdoms. Maybe this Professor Marvel fellow knew something about the future that other folks didn't. With a human skull peering down from its painted perch above the door inside his wagon, the good professor lectured Dorothy of the priests of Isis and Osiris and the days of pharaohs of Egypt. When Dorothy Gale and her new friends emerged from the forest, they were elated to see Emerald City, for they were only a short jaunt away. The Wicked Witch of the West, desperate for the ruby slippers that Dorothy was wearing, would have to make her move before her heroes were inside the walls. A significant point here is the original book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, published in 1900s, 39 years earlier. The slippers were not ruby or red, but silver. At the time the book was set, and 15 ounces of silver, silver being the more plentiful of the two metals. Just as the silver slippers carried Dorothy, America's stockpile of silver and gold backing the currency carried the country to a position of preeminence throughout the world at that time. But, as mentioned, when the movie came out in 1939, the slippers were not silver but red. Between 1916 and 1933, virtually all Americans' gold ended up in England and Germany, as directed by the owners of the private Federal Reserve Bank. The reason for this was that the Federal Reserve notes could be redeemed in gold, and the use of Federal Reserve notes carried an interest penalty that could only be paid in gold. We traded our gold in exchange for use of worthless paper with green ink on it, whereas our original currency, United States notes, carried no such interest requirement. But such was the bargain that came with the Federal Reserve notes. When bankruptcy was declared in 1933, Americans were required to turn in all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates by May 1st, May Day, the birth of communism in Bavaria in 1776, the birthday of the IRS, is celebrated worldwide as the International Workers' Holiday. A holy day to the wizard and his tribe, that is to say. Consulting people who were alive at the time, you may find out that the general sentiment towards such thievery bordered on a second revolution. Maybe it was just too much of a clue, too much salt in the wound, for Dorothy to be skipping down the yellow brick road in a pair of silver slippers. So, for whatever reason, a color less likely to annoy and provoke was selected. Regarding the choice of ruby or red-colored slippers, red's primary significance, at least on documents and the like, is that it is the color of blood, as in flesh and blood, and symbolize a living, breathing man or woman, that is to say, non-corporate, artificial. It also signifies private rather than public, quotes public. The new Social Security card has a red serial number on the reverse, likely signifying the private side account associated with your trade name's public side Social Security number before redemption. For postal employees, red sticker registered mail means personal accountability or private. All other mail carriers, limited liability public. It is likely that the ruby slippers symbolize the American people with blood in their veins and not citizen of the United States, straw man trade names with their counterfeit corporate blood of black and blue ink on a birth certificate. No matter their color in the movie, the Wicked Witch of the West wanted those slippers at any cost and had to move fast before Dorothy and crew could make it into Emerald City. Her tactic was to cover the countryside with poppy fields or poppies, the source of heroin, opium, and morphine, symbolically drugging them into unconsciousness, and then just waltzing in and snatch the slippers. In other words, the best way to subjugate the American people and boost the goods was to dull their senses by getting them hooked on drugs. Note, LSD was created the same year, 1939, by Dr. Albert Hofmann. The poppies and drugs worked on Dorothy, the lion, and Toto, our flesh and blood friends, but had no effect on the Scarecrow or the Tin Man, the artificial entities. Two of them cried out for help, and Glenda, the good witch of the north, answered their prayers with a blanket of snow, just like cocaine, a stimulant, nullifying the narcotic effect of the poppies and opiums on Dorothy, the lion, and Toto. At this writing, aside from marijuana, the two most available drugs on the streets of America are heroin, cocaine, in their various forms. As they all scampered towards the Emerald City, the City of Green, Federal Reserve notes, the new fiat money, or money by decree, we hear the Munchkins singing on the glory of the wizard's creation. You're out of the woods, you're out of the dark, you're out of the night. Step into the sun, step into the light. Keep straight ahead for the most glorious place on the face of the earth or the stars. The foregoing jingles abound with the luminous Luciferian symbols and metaphors referencing darkness and light. The Wicked Witch of the West made her home in a round medieval watchtower, ancient symbol of the Knights Templar of Freemasonry, who were given to practice witchcraft and also credited as the originators of modern banking circa 1099 AD. The Wicked Witch of the West was also dressed in black, the color symbolizing the planet Saturn, sacred icon of the Knights of Templar, and the color of choice of judges and priests for their robes. Who was the Wicked Witch of the West? Remember, in the first part of the film, her counterpart was Elmira Gulch, who, according to Aunt Em, owned half of the country. Miss Gulch alleged that Dorothy's dog Toto had bitten her. She came to the farm with an order from the sheriff demanding that they surrender Toto into her custody. Aunt Em was not immediately cooperative and answered Miss Gulch's allegations with Toto had bitten her. Quote, "He's really gentle, with gentle people, that is." Could gentle really mean Gentile? When Miss Gulch defied them to withhold Toto and go against the law, dear old Aunt Em was relegated to pushing the party line for Big Brother. She dutifully succumbed under the pressure and counseled Dorothy reluctantly, quotes, We can't go against the law, Dorothy. I'm afraid poor Toto will have to go." When Dorothy refused to surrender Toto, Miss Gulch lashed out. Quote, "If you don't hand over that dog, I'll bring the damn suit that'll take your whole farm." Today, 70% of all lawyers of the world reside in the West, America to be exact, and 95% of all lawsuits in the world are filed under U.S. jurisdiction. The Wicked Witch of the West and Miss Gulch, my dear friends, represents esquires, judges, and attorneys, that is to say, the American legal system, including the attorney-run U.S. Congress and White House, executioner, and primary henchman for transferring all wealth in America, everything from the people into the possession of the banks and the government. The Wicked Witch of the West wanted the silver slippers, the precious metals, and her counterpart, Miss Gulch, wanted Toto. What does the word Toto mean in attorney language? That's to say Latin. Toto means everything. Dorothy and the gang fell for the wizard's illusion in the beginning, but soon wised up and discovered the wizard for what he was, a confidence man. When asked about helping the Scarecrow, or Straw Man, among other babblings about getting a brain and the universities, the wizard also cited the land of E pluribus unum, which is Latin for one out of many. Let's say converting the many into one equals New World Order, Novus Ordo Seclorum. a Latin phrase placed on the American $1 bill shortly after the bankruptcy. He also proudly revealed and confessed that he was born and bred in the heart of the western wilderness, an old Kansas man himself. The bankers did pretty well in Europe, but as the wizard pointed out, they made a killing in the western wilderness. That is to say, America, with the theft of American gold, labor, and property from the quoting John D. Rockefeller, quote, graceful and responsive rural folk, unquote, who populated the country at that time. When Dorothy asked Glenda, the good witch of the North, Santa Claus, or Christianity, for help in getting back to Kansas, Glenda replied, "You don't need to be helped. You've always had the power to go back to Kansas." Translation: You had the right and the power to exercise your sovereignty, you just forgot. The actual fact of asserting your sovereignty, or remedy, a common law, copyright, notice, and the UCC financing statement for filing with the Secretary of State can be completed from scratch in no time. America and Americans have intimate first-hand knowledge of the heartless mechanics of the laws of commerce religiously applied by the unregistered foreign agents at Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. The IRS accountancy firm and collection agency for the private Federal Reserve Bank was constituted under the UCC at its inception in 1954 and was operating strictly in that realm ever since. You may have wondered what is the meaning behind the words in the title, The Wizard of Oz. Look them up in the dictionary. Like almost everything else, it's right out there in the open for you to see if you just look closely enough. The definition of wizard is a very clever or skillful person. OZ, Oz, is the abbreviation of onza, ONZA, the Italian word for ounce, or ounces, the unit of measure of gold, silver, and other precious metals. No matter how large the quantity of gold and silver being discussed, the amount is always expressed in ounces, rather than hundreds of tons of gold. It's so many million ounces of gold. As attested by the factual history of this country, the Wizard of Oz was the Wizard of Ounces. Everything worked out for Dorothy, that is to say, the American people in the end, and she made it home, meaning there is remedy in law. That's it. It was just encoded and disguised and camouflaged. Fortunately, the code has been cracked, and there is a way home, just like in the movie. Like Dorothy said, there's no place like home, and there isn't. There's nothing like sovereignty for a sovereign. You have commercial remedy in the redemption process. Will you continue to be conned by the confidence men and worship the wizard's light show? Or will you wise up like Dorothy did and look behind the scenes? Alright, and that looks like the end of the glossary. That is the end of part 1 of Cracking the Code 3rd edition. Thanks for listening. If you've gotten this far, let's continue to read it.